Hey, what's good, Internet? I am the Angry Philosopher on Drugs. And with the brutal and tragic murder of Courtney Heron in Melbourne sometime late Saturday night to Friday night to Saturday morning, Australia is once again talking about this issue of men's attitudes towards women, leading to men's abuse of women, leading to men's violence of women. Now, Studio 10 ran a session on this, showing the police commissioner down in Victoria talking about how all men need to reflect on their attitudes towards women and understand their part in this. And being the one male on the panel, Joe Hildebrand was asked his opinion. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what attitudes you're already bringing into this subject, Joe decided not to go with the narrative of men's being generally disrespectful towards women, but instead decided to point out the fact that no, he's not disrespectful towards women, he's not violent towards women, and it's insulting to suggest that men in general should consider their actions and be introspective over the violent actions of a few. As you might expect, Joe's had an outpouring of support from a lot of men and women around the country and even around the world. That's also largely been in the wake of an overflowing tide of backlash from people who are just furious at his comments in general. Now, he penned an amazing article about this following up. It's on news.com.au. And seriously, if you do a search for Joe Hildebrand on Twitter and you can't find his article, I'm not sure how you even managed to find me on the internet. So I'm just going to assume you can find it. Now, Joe covered a lot of great stuff in his article. And I was actually worried he'd leave me nothing to talk about. But thankfully, the two things I did want to bring up, Joe didn't actually cover. So here they are. Firstly, one of the things that was often thrown at Joe was this, oh, please, not more of this hashtag, not all men. Now, to be clear, I actually agree that hashtag not all men is a dumpster fire of a tweet. It is an abysmal monstrosity. It is the Huffington Post of hashtags. That is how much I despise it. The reason I despise it, however, is not for the reason a lot of people do. I dislike the term not all men because not all men implies that, hey, there are exceptions to violent men and I'm one of them. It's sycophantic, and it's a handful of people throwing themselves under the bus or throwing everyone else under the bus. Be they men throwing other men under the bus or women saying, yes, men are vile, but the men I know are okay. No, fuck that. Because that leads to the next hashtag, which is the hashtag yes, all men. Now, if not all men is the Huffington Post of hashtags, yes, all men is the BuzzFeed news of hashtags. It is the entire BuzzFeed conglomerate of hashtags. Yeah, I won't doubt that some women have bought so heavily into the men predator, women prey sort of narrative trope, whatever, that yes, all men do make them uncomfortable. And that's a problem that needs to be dealt with. These women need help and care to be taken out of this dangerous mindset. But that's not a problem for the men around them, it's a problem for them and the people throwing this narrative at them. Most men are not the. It's not that most men are violent, but not all men, so some men are the exception, as Joe himself pointed out. Not explicitly in that sense, but he went and looked up a latest comprehensive report from the Australian Institute of Criminology, which I actually found myself, and I'll see if I can put a link in the comments below or in a tweet regarding attached to this video or whatever. However, the rate in 2014 of homicide is 1 per 100,000 people, the lowest since it began. Now, between, I believe, 2015 and 2017, or over a 2 year period, the homicides in Australia were tallied at 487. From July 2012 to 2014. Thank you for sticking with me on drugs, remember. Now, Australia's population was at a bit over 23 million, so that puts us at around 11.5 million males. Now, Joe says he's projecting the absolute worst case scenario here, which was every single murderer was male and every single victim was female. And he says that would make around 1 in 23, followed by 3 zeros. 23,000 males would be a killer, which is 0.0042% of the male population. But he didn't quite lay out how much of a worst case scenario that is. Because in this case, every single killer would have to be a unique killer of a unique crime. There's no repeat offenders with this number. There's no incidences of gang warfare, for example, where one person might be killing multiple people, or multiple people killing other multiple people. No, this scenario suggests that one man over 487 cases decided to up and kill one woman. Now, as he had said further on, homicide victims tend to be male, 2/3 male rather than female. So this number just keeps going down, especially considering that many homicide offenders are also female. Overwhelmingly male, let's not dispute that. But the rate at which men are killing women starts from the worst case scenario at 1 in 23,000 and keeps going down. Now, the other issue, there was another issue, I've completely forgotten it. Honestly, the dumpster fire that is not all men, yes, all men. The hashtag really should go some men, or yes, some people. Because, look, when it comes to disrespectful attitudes about men, about women, about sex, etc., most of the filthiest jokes making fun of sex and regarding the sexual act and women don't come from my male friends. They come from my female friends, the wives and girlfriends of my male friends. And everybody at the table tends to laugh. It's not a male thing. I do know some men who might actually think it's acceptable to be abusive towards women, and I don't associate with those men anymore, because when I did try calling them out and when I did try suggesting that behavior was unacceptable, they turned that violent and abusive attitude towards me. As soon as I realized that there was no progress to be made there, I cut off that relationship, because that's unhealthy. Now, that actually leads me to the second point, which I just now remembered. In similar articles written about this murder, the one quote that comes to mind is, what is it that makes men think that raping and murdering and generally abusing women is acceptable? The answer to that question is nothing. Not a damn thing. Okay? Now, firstly, some people out there may be so emotionally retarded, and I use that in the health medical sense, that they don't understand that hurting people is wrong. Those people generally tend not to make it out of childhood without being institutionalized somewhere. The absolute psychopaths and sociopaths who don't have the empathy or the sense of morality to not go out and abuse and murder anyone, let alone women, even they know it's not all right. How do we know? Because when you read the descriptions of these murders that have taken place down in Victoria, every one of them takes place in a dark and isolated place. If men in general, as a demographic, thought that, raping, abusing, and murdering women was acceptable, it'd be a fucking hellscape out there. It would be a dystopian nightmare. And let me tell you, the men who are really good at abusing people, they wouldn't just stop with women. They'd be picking off all the weaker men too, and out there would be an anarchy of right might makes right. No, these people know that it's wrong. And the worst part about this is, logically speaking, when you say we need to teach men that it's not okay to abuse and rape and murder, you're actually morally absolving these men and women where necessary, but mostly men, of their crimes. They're not morally retarded. They're not sick in the head. They're not reprehensible individuals. They missed the memo. They were sick the day that we all went into school and the teacher sat us down and said, now, boys, don't rape and abuse girls. You know, if we just taught them that it wasn't okay, they wouldn't be these reprehensible, sick in the head. I, I don't. The words don't really do it justice, and that's the thing. Many of them are sick in the head, as again Joe points out. It's down here somewhere, but the man I. Ah, yes, here we go. He was also homeless, as was the latest tragic victim, Courtney Heron. I missed some context there, but her alleged killer, Henry Hammond, too, was reportedly living out of a van and described as having major mental health problems. He apparently told people that he was both Jesus and Odin. I don't think his problem was a set of XY chromosomes. I think his problem was mental delusion. And there's a running trend of poverty and mental health that runs through a lot of the people who wind up in these newspapers accused of killing these young women. Also, to go back to that report Joe mentioned, of the 487 homicides over that 2 year period, 100 of them were down in Victoria. Now, if we average that out to 50 a year, the article, one of the articles I read on this states that this is an all too familiar scenario, having a vigil for a woman murdered at the hands of a man in Victoria. Well, if 50 people were murdered in Victoria over the period of a year in general, then for every one of those 4 young women murdered, another 12 to 13 men were also murdered. Where are the candlelight vigils for these poor buggers? Now, it's probably part of the chivalristic Western principles that our society's developed from biblical times, from Judea to Rome to Britain to England and then Australia, that harming a woman is worse than harming a man. And hey, I'm a Christian myself. Generally speaking, I'm agreeing with that. I think a man's job is to protect the women in his life and the children in his life. At the end of the day, though, I hate that phrase. What it boils down to is, if we're going to talk about equality, then we need to talk about all of the victims of homicide, while acknowledging that most of the perpetrators of homicide are men, because we are the more violent gender. Let's not hold one man. Let's not hold 22,999 men accountable for the actions of one in that worst case scenario. Look, I think I've covered all the points I wanted to cover. Joe, you're a dead set legend. Hopefully this dogpiling ends, and hopefully the support continues. Thanks for putting some new data into the national conversation. And to everyone else, look, just think. Put your emotions aside for a moment, acknowledge them as real and valid, but think about the data. I'm the angry philosopher on drugs, and I'm telling you to use your brains, because if I can work this shit out, so can you.